Welcome to this comprehensive journey through the history of Illinois, the land of Lincoln, the Prairie State, and the crossroads of America, from the mysterious mound builders of Cahokia to the towering skyscrapers of Chicago. Illinois has been at the center of American history for over 1,000 years. Today, we'll explore how this land transformed from ancient Native American civilizations to French colonial outpost, from frontier territory to industrial powerhouse, and how it became the birthplace of presidents, the stage for pivotal moments in civil rights, and an economic engine that helped build modern America. Buckle up for an epic journey spanning over 12,000 years of human history in the heart of the American Midwest. Let's begin where all great stories start, at the beginning. Part 1: The First Peoples, the Paleo-Indians, and Archaic Peoples. Our story begins around 10,000 BCE, when the first humans arrived in what would become Illinois. These Paleo-Indians followed the retreating glaciers of the last ice age, hunting massive creatures like mastodons and giant ground sloths across the tundra-like landscape. As the climate warmed and the megafauna disappeared, these peoples adapted. By 8000 BCE, the Archaic period had begun. These hunter-gatherers developed more sophisticated tools, began cultivating plants, and established seasonal camps along Illinois' rivers. The Coster site near the Illinois River shows continuous habitation for over 9,000 years, making it one of the most significant archaeological sites in North America. The Woodland Period. Around 500 BCE, the Woodland Period brought revolutionary changes. Pottery appeared. Agriculture expanded with crops like squash and sunflowers, and elaborate burial mounds began dotting the landscape. The Hopewell culture, flourishing between 200 BCE and 500 CE, created vast trade networks stretching from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean. Illinois became a crucial hub in this network. Copper from Lake Superior, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains all passed through Illinois settlements. The mounds they built, many still visible today, served as burial sites, ceremonial centers, and monuments to their sophisticated society. The rise of Cahokia, but nothing compared to what came next. Around 600 CE, a new culture emerged along the Mississippi River. The Mississippian culture would create the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico, Cahokia. By 1050 CE, Cahokia had exploded into a metropolis. At its peak around 1200 CE, it housed between 10,000 and 20,000 people, larger than London at the same time. The city covered 6 square miles and featured over 120 earthen mounds. The massive Monk's Mound, standing 100 feet tall and covering 14 acres at its base, remains the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas. Cahokia was a marvel of urban planning. It had designated neighborhoods, public plazas, astronomical observatories called woodhenges, and a sophisticated agricultural system that fed its massive population. The city controlled trade along the Mississippi and influenced cultures from Wisconsin to Louisiana. But by 1350, Cahokia was abandoned. Climate change, resource depletion, political upheaval, or disease. We still don't know exactly why this great civilization vanished. When European explorers arrived centuries later, they found only grass-covered mounds and no memory of the builders among the local tribes. The historic tribes. By 1500 CE, the Illinois Confederation had emerged as the dominant force in the region. This alliance of about 12 tribes including the Cahokia, Kaskaskia, Michigamia, Peoria, and Tamaroa, controlled most of present-day Illinois, eastern Missouri, and parts of Iowa and Indiana. They called themselves Inoka or Illiniwek, meaning the men or the people. These Algonquian-speaking peoples lived in villages along rivers, growing corn, beans, and squash in summer, and dispersing for winter hunts. They built long houses covered in rush mats, crafted beautiful pottery and tools, and maintained extensive trade networks. To the north lived the Miami and Mascoutin tribes. The Kickapoo controlled western territories, and increasingly, the powerful Iroquois Confederacy sent war parties from the east, disrupting the delicate balance of power that had existed for generations. Part 2. European Contact and French Colonization. First contact in 1673, everything changed. French explorer Louis Joliet and Jesuit missionary Father Jacques Marquette became the first Europeans to document their journey through Illinois. Paddling down the Mississippi from Wisconsin, they encountered the Illinois Confederation near present-day Peoria. The Illinois people welcomed these strangers, sharing food and knowledge. Marquette was particularly impressed, writing about their generous hospitality and the fertility of the land. This first meeting set the tone for generally peaceful French-native relations that would define Illinois for the next century. La Salle and French expansion. If Marquette and Joliet opened the door, René Robert Cavelier, Sieur de La Salle, walked through it. In 1680, La Salle built Fort Crèvecoeur near present-day Peoria, the first European fort in Illinois. Though abandoned within months, it marked the beginning of permanent European presence in the region. La Salle recognized Illinois' strategic importance. It connected the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, controlled the continental fur trade, and possessed incredibly fertile soil. He envisioned a French empire stretching from Quebec to New Orleans, with Illinois as its heartland. In 1682, La Salle proclaimed the entire Mississippi River basin for France, naming it Louisiana after King Louis XIV. Illinois became part of this vast French territory, administratively part of French Canada, but increasingly oriented toward New Orleans. The fur trade era. The fur trade transformed Illinois. French voyageurs and coureurs de bois established trading posts throughout the region. Kaskaskia, founded in 1703, became the commercial hub. Cahokia, named after the ancient city's mounds nearby, was established in 1699. Fort de Chartres, built in 1720, became the military and governmental center of French Illinois. The French approach differed markedly from British colonization. Rather than displacing native peoples, the French integrated into existing networks. French traders married native women, creating a mixed heritage population called Métis. They adopted native customs, languages, and ways of life. This cultural fusion created a unique society. French Illinois was multilingual, multicultural, and remarkably egalitarian by European standards. Native peoples maintained considerable autonomy while benefiting from European trade goods, metal tools, firearms, cloth, and other manufactured items that made daily life easier. Colonial life and society. By 1750, French Illinois had developed its own distinct character. The population remained small, perhaps 2,000 French colonists and their descendants, but their influence was enormous. Villages like Kaskaskia and Cahokia featured French-style houses with galleries and steep roofs adapted to the prairie climate. The Catholic Church played a central role, Jesuit and seminary priests established missions, schools, and hospitals. They documented native languages, mediated disputes, and often advocated for native rights against colonial exploitation. Agriculture flourished in the river valleys. French farmers, called habitants, grew wheat, corn, and tobacco. They raised cattle and hogs, planted orchards and gardens. The region became known as the Garden of New France, supplying food to French settlements from Detroit to New Orleans. The French and Indian War. This prosperity couldn't last. In 1754, tensions between Britain and France erupted into the French and Indian War. Though most fighting occurred in the Ohio Valley in Canada, Illinois felt the effects. Trade disrupted, native alliances shifted, and uncertainty gripped the colony. The war's outcome was devastating for French Illinois. In 1763, the Treaty of Paris transferred all French territory east of the Mississippi to Britain. After 90 years, French rule in Illinois ended. Many French colonists crossed the Mississippi to Spanish-controlled St. Louis rather than live under British rule. Part 3. British Rule and the American Revolution. The British Takeover. British rule in Illinois was troubled from the start. In 1763, Chief Pontiac led a confederation of tribes in rebellion against British expansion. Though Pontiac's rebellion failed to expel the British, it forced them to reconsider their approach. The Proclamation of 1763 prohibited colonial settlement west of the Appalachians, technically including Illinois. The Quebec Act of 1774 placed Illinois under Quebec's government, maintaining French civil law and protecting Catholic rights. These measures pleased French inhabitants and native peoples but enraged American colonists who wanted Western lands. Unlike the French, few British settlers came to Illinois. The British focused on the fur trade, maintaining French trading posts but never developing the agricultural settlements. This neglect would prove costly when revolution came to the Illinois country. George Rogers Clark's campaign. When the American Revolution began in 1775, Illinois seemed far from the action. But the British used Great Lakes posts to supply native allies who raided American frontier settlements. Something had to be done. Enter George Rogers Clark, a young Virginia frontiersman with a bold plan. In 1778, with just 175 men, Clark launched one of the most audacious campaigns of the Revolution. His goal: capture the Illinois country and secure the western frontier for the United States. On July 4th, 1778, Clark's forces surprised Kaskaskia, capturing it without firing a shot. The French inhabitants, having no love for British rule, welcomed the Americans. Father Pierre Gibault, the local priest, helped Clark win over Vincennes. By summer's end, Clark controlled all of Illinois without losing a single man. But holding Illinois proved harder than taking it. British Lieutenant Governor Henry Hamilton, called the hair buyer for allegedly paying for American scalps, recaptured Vincennes that December. Clark's response became legendary. In February 1779, Clark led 170 men on an epic march through freezing floodwaters to surprise Hamilton at Vincennes. For 18 days, they waded through icy water, sometimes chest deep, surviving on minimal rations. The suffering paid off. Clark's surprise attack forced Hamilton's surrender, securing Illinois for the United States. The consequences of conquest. Clark's victory had enormous consequences. When peace negotiations began in 1782, American control of Illinois strengthened the United States' claim to all territory east of the Mississippi. The 1783 Treaty of Paris confirmed this, doubling the new nation's size. But what about the people already living in Illinois? The French inhabitants found themselves under a third flag in 20 years. Native peoples faced an uncertain future as American settlers looked hungrily at their lands. And enslaved Africans, yes, slavery existed in French and British Illinois, wondered if American freedom applied to them. Part 4: Territorial Period and Early Statehood. The Northwest Ordinance. In 1787, Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance, one of the most important laws in American history. It organized the territory north of the Ohio River, including Illinois, and established the process for creating new states. Crucially, the ordinance prohibited slavery in the Northwest Territory. This decision would profoundly shape Illinois' future. Though the reality proved more complex, French slaveholders were allowed to keep their enslaved people, and various forms of indentured servitude persisted for decades. The ordinance also promised fair treatment of native peoples, stating their land would never be taken without consent. This promise, like many others, would be broken repeatedly in coming decades. Illinois Territory, initially part of the vast Northwest Territory, Illinois became part of Indiana Territory in 1800, but distances were too great for effective governance. In 1809, Illinois became its own territory, with Kaskaskia as capital. Nathaniel Pope, Illinois' territorial delegate to Congress, proved instrumental in shaping the future state. He successfully lobbied to move Illinois' northern boundary 41 miles north to include the future site of Chicago. This seemingly minor adjustment would transform Illinois' destiny, giving it access to Lake Michigan and ensuring it would be a free state, aligned with the North rather than the South. The War of 1812 brought violence back to Illinois. The British again allied with native tribes, leading to massacres and battles throughout the territory. Fort Dearborn, established in 1803, where Chicago now stands, was evacuated in 1812. As soldiers and settlers fled, Potawatomi warriors attacked, killing 52 in what became known as the Fort Dearborn Massacre. The path to statehood. By 1818, Illinois had reached the 60,000 inhabitants required for statehood, barely. The census counted 40,258, but creative counting of travelers and temporary residents pushed it over the threshold. On December 3rd, 1818, Illinois became the 21st state. The new state faced enormous challenges. The population was scattered across a territory larger than England. Roads were nearly non-existent. Government was broke. And tensions between pro-slavery Southern settlers and anti-slavery Northerners threatened to tear the state apart. Black Hawk War. The most serious challenge came from native peoples fighting to preserve their lands. The Sauk leader Black Hawk refused to recognize treaties ceding his people's territory. In 1832, he led 1,500 followers back across the Mississippi to resettle ancestral lands in Illinois. The Black Hawk War was brief, but brutal. Militia units, including young Abraham Lincoln as a captain, pursued Black Hawk's band through northern Illinois and Wisconsin. The war climaxed at the Battle of Bad Axe, where soldiers and their Dakota allies massacred hundreds of Sauk, including women and children trying to flee across the Mississippi. Black Hawk's defeat marked the end of Native American resistance in Illinois. By 1837, virtually all Native peoples had been removed from the state. The prairie was open for settlement, and settlers poured in by the thousands. Early immigration and settlement. The 1830s and 1840s saw explosive growth. The state's population grew from 157,445 in 1830 to 851,170 in 1850. Yankees from New England settled the North. Southerners occupied the South. And increasingly, European immigrants arrived seeking opportunity in the fertile prairie. Germans fleeing political upheaval established communities like Belleville and Quincy. Irish escaping famine worked on canal and railroad construction. Swedes created agricultural colonies in northern counties. Each group brought their customs, religions, and languages, creating a diverse cultural mosaic. The Illinois and Michigan Canal, completed in 1848, connected Lake Michigan to the Mississippi River system. This 96-mile canal transformed Chicago from a muddy outpost to a commercial hub. Grain from Iowa farms could now reach eastern markets through Chicago. The canal made Illinois the crucial link between East and West. Part 5, Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War Era. Young Lincoln in Illinois. No figure looms larger in Illinois history than Abraham Lincoln. Though born in Kentucky, Lincoln grew to manhood in Illinois. His family moved to Macon County in 1830, and young Abraham soon struck out on his own to New Salem. In this small Sangamon River town, Lincoln transformed himself. He worked as a store clerk, surveyor, and postmaster. He educated himself by reading every book he could borrow. He wrestled local champions, told stories, and earned his neighbors' respect. When the store failed, Lincoln spent years paying off the debt, earning him the nickname Honest Abe. Lincoln's political career began in 1834 when he was elected to the Illinois legislature as a Whig. He taught himself law, passing the bar in 1836. The next year, he moved to Springfield, the new state capital, where he established a successful legal practice. The Prairie Lawyer. For 2 decades, Lincoln rode the judicial circuit, traveling from county to county trying cases. He handled everything from divorces to murders, railroad disputes to patent cases. His reputation for honesty, humor, and legal brilliance grew. He argued over 400 cases before the Illinois Supreme Court, but Lincoln's ambitions reached beyond the courtroom. He served 4 terms in the state legislature and 1 term in Congress. He was instrumental in moving the state capital from Vandalia to Springfield. Though his political career seemed stalled in the 1850s, the slavery question would give him a new platform. The Lincoln-Douglas debates. In 1858, Lincoln challenged incumbent Senator Stephen A. Douglas, the most powerful Democrat in Illinois. Douglas had championed popular sovereignty, letting territories decide whether to allow slavery. Lincoln argued slavery should not expand into new territories. The 7 Lincoln-Douglas debates became the most famous political debates in American history. Thousands gathered in towns across Illinois to hear the 2 men argue for 3 hours at a time. Newspapers nationwide reprinted their speeches. Douglas painted Lincoln as a dangerous abolitionist who would destroy the Union. Lincoln portrayed Douglas as morally indifferent to slavery's evil. Though Lincoln lost the Senate race, the debates made him a national figure and positioned him for the presidency. Illinois in the Civil War. When Lincoln won the presidency in 1860, Illinois stood firmly behind him. The state sent more soldiers per capita to the Union Army than any other, over 250,000 men, nearly 1/4 of its male population. Illinois units fought in every major battle, from Fort Donelson to Appomattox. Ulysses S. Grant living in Galena, received his first Civil War command in Illinois. He trained troops at Camp Douglas outside Chicago and led Illinois regiments to early victories at Forts Henry and Donelson. These successes launched Grant's rise to commanding general. The war transformed Illinois' economy. Chicago became the Union's primary supply depot. Its stockyards fed the army. Its factories produced uniforms, weapons, and equipment. The Board of Trade standardized grain trading, making Chicago the commodity capital of the world. By war's end, Illinois had emerged as an industrial power, the home front, but not all Illinoisans supported the war. Southern Illinois, settled by Southerners, harbored strong Confederate sympathies. Copperheads, peace, Democrats who opposed the war, organized resistance. Secret societies like the Knights of the Golden Circle plotted uprisings. The war's deadliest home front incident occurred at Camp Douglas, Chicago's prisoner of war camp. Over 4,000 Confederate prisoners died there from disease, exposure, and neglect, earning it the nickname 80 Acres of Hell. African Americans in Illinois seized the opportunity for freedom. Though the state's black laws restricted their rights, thousands of enslaved people fled to Illinois via the Underground Railroad. After the Emancipation Proclamation, Illinois' African Americans enlisted enthusiastically, forming several regiments that fought with distinction. Lincoln's legacy, Lincoln's assassination in 1865, devastated Illinois. His funeral train journey from Washington to Springfield became a national mourning ritual. Over 1 million people viewed his remains. His tomb in Springfield became a pilgrimage site, cementing Illinois' identity as the land of Lincoln. Part 6: The Gilded Age and Industrial Revolution. Chicago's Rise. The Great Chicago Fire of October 10, 1871, should have destroyed the city. The inferno killed 300 people, left 100,000 homeless, and destroyed over 17,000 structures. But Chicagoans rebuilt with astonishing speed and ambition. The fire cleared the way for modern Chicago. Architects like William LeBaron Jenney, Daniel Burnham, and Louis Sullivan invented the skyscraper. The home insurance building, completed in 1885, became the world's first skyscraper with its steel frames construction. The Chicago School of Architecture was born, influencing urban design worldwide. By 1890, Chicago had surpassed Philadelphia as America's second largest city. The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition showcased Chicago's resurrection. The White City featured neoclassical buildings, electric lights, and attractions that drew 27 million visitors. It introduced America to the Ferris wheel, Cracker Jack, and the promise of the American century. The industrial boom Illinois became America's industrial heartland. Chicago's Union Stockyards opened in 1865, centralized meatpacking. By 1900, Chicago processed 82% of American meat. Refrigerated rail cars, invented by Chicago's Gustavus Swift, allowed fresh meat shipment nationwide. Cyrus McCormick's Reaper Factory made Chicago the agricultural machinery capital. George Pullman built luxurious railroad cars. Montgomery Ward and Sears, Roebuck revolutionized retail with mail-order catalogs. John Deere's steel plow, manufactured in Moline, broke the prairie and fed the nation. Southern Illinois coal fields fueled this industrial growth. Mining towns like Herrin, Marion, and West Frankfort boomed. By 1900, Illinois ranked third nationally in coal production. These mines attracted immigrants from Italy, Poland, Lithuania, and Slovakia, creating diverse ethnic communities in unexpected places. Labor wars, industrialization's dark side, sparked America's most violent labor conflicts. The 1886 Haymarket Affair began as a peaceful rally for the 8-hour workday. When police moved to disperse the crowd, someone threw a bomb, killing 7 officers. 8 anarchists were convicted in a trial many considered a travesty of justice. 4 were hanged, making them martyrs to the labor movement worldwide. The 1894 Pullman strike paralyzed national rail traffic when George Pullman cut wages but not rents in his company town. Workers struck. Eugene Debs's American Railway Union supported them with a boycott. President Cleveland sent federal troops to break the strike, killing 30 workers. The strike's failure set back labor, organizing for decades. These conflicts made Chicago synonymous with class warfare, but they also sparked reforms. Jane Addams founded Hull House in 1889, pioneering the settlement house movement. Hull House provided education, childcare, and social services to immigrants while advocating for labor laws, women's suffrage, and social justice. Immigration transformation. Between 1870 and 1920, Illinois's population exploded from 2.5 million to 6.5 million. Chicago alone grew from 300,000 to 2.7 million. Most growth came from immigration. Germans remained the largest group, establishing breweries, newspapers, and cultural institutions. Irish dominated politics and police forces. Poles created the world's largest Polish community outside Warsaw. Italians, Jews, Greeks, Czechs, and Lithuanians established vibrant neighborhoods. Each group faced discrimination, but gradually gained acceptance. They built churches, synagogues, schools, and mutual aid societies. They maintained old country traditions while embracing American opportunities. Chicago became the most ethnically diverse city in America, a laboratory for the American experiment. Progressive era reforms. The Progressive era brought reforms to address industrialization's problems. Illinois led many reforms. The state established the first juvenile court in 1899. It passed progressive labor laws, limiting working hours and improving factory conditions. Governor John Peter Altgeld pardoned the surviving Haymarket defendants and reformed the state's prison system. Governor Frank Loudon modernized state government and promoted agricultural improvement. Women like Frances Willard led the temperance movement, while Ida B. Wells Barnett courageously documented lynching and fought for civil rights. In 1913, Illinois granted women partial suffrage, the first state east of the Mississippi to do so. This victory energized the national suffrage movement, contributing to the 19th Amendment's passage. Part 7. The Roaring Twenties and Prohibition. Chicago, capital of the Jazz Age. The 1920s roared loudest in Chicago. The Great Migration brought hundreds of thousands of African Americans from the South, transforming the city's South Side into Bronzeville, the Black metropolis. This cultural explosion created Chicago jazz and blues. King Oliver, Louis Armstrong, and Jelly Roll Morton made Chicago the jazz capital. The city's nightclubs, the Sunset Cafe, the Savoy Ballroom, the Grand Terrace, became legendary venues. Chicago blues, electrified and urbanized, would influence all popular music that followed. The Chicago Defender, the nation's most influential black newspaper, reached hundreds of thousands of readers nationwide. It encouraged Southern blacks to migrate north and fought fearlessly for civil rights. Al Capone and organized crime prohibition, beginning in 1920, turned Chicago into America's crime capital. Al Capone built a criminal empire worth $100 million annually. His organization controlled thousands of speakeasies, breweries, and distilleries. Capone became a celebrity, a symbol of the era's excesses. The 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre shocked the nation. 7 members of a rival gang were machine gunned in a North Side garage. Though never convicted of the massacre, Capone was eventually imprisoned for tax evasion in 1931. But organized crime wasn't just about Italians. Irish, Jewish, Polish, and African American gangs controlled different territories and rackets. Political corruption was endemic. Mayor Big Bill Thompson openly allied with gangsters. The city's reputation for corruption persists today. Culture and innovation. Despite crime and corruption, 1920s Chicago produced remarkable cultural achievements. Carl Sandburg celebrated the city of big shoulders in poetry. Theodore Dreiser and James T. Farrell wrote naturalistic novels about urban life. The Chicago Tribune Tower competition attracted designs from the world's greatest architects. Sports flourished. The Chicago Bears, founded in Decatur as the Staleys, moved to Chicago in 1921. Red Grange, the galloping ghost from Wheaton, became football's first superstar. The Black Sox scandal of 1919, where White Sox players threw the World Series, shocked baseball fans but couldn't diminish the sport's popularity. Radio broadcasting began at KYW in 1921, making Chicago a communications hub. The Chicago Board of Trade, rebuilt in 1930 as an Art Deco masterpiece, remained the world's agricultural trading center. The Part 8: Depression, War, and Transformation. The Great Depression hits. The 1929 stock market crash hit Illinois hard. By 1933, unemployment reached 50% in Chicago. Banks failed by the hundreds. Farmers, already struggling with low prices, faced foreclosure. Homeless camps called Hoovervilles sprouted in Grant Park. The 1933 Century of Progress. World's Fair provided rare optimism. Celebrating Chicago's centennial, it attracted 48 million visitors over 2 years. Its modernist architecture and technological exhibits promised a brighter future despite present hardships. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal brought relief. The Works Progress Administration employed thousands building parks, schools, and roads. The Civilian Conservation Corps created state parks. The Farm Security Administration helped struggling farmers. Social Security and unemployment insurance provided safety nets. Political machines and reform Depression era. Illinois politics was dominated by machines. In Chicago, Democrats under bosses like Anton Cermak and later Edward Kelly controlled patronage jobs that meant survival for many families. Downstate, Republican machines held sway, but reform movements emerged. Governor Henry Horner, though elected by the Chicago machine, fought for honest government. Paul Douglas, later a senator, championed civil rights and clean politics. Adlai Stevenson began his rise as a reformist voice in the Democratic Party. World War II. World War II transformed Illinois. Chicago became the arsenal of democracy. Douglas Aircraft built C-54 transport planes. The Pullman Company manufactured Sherman tanks. The Manhattan Project's first controlled nuclear reaction occurred under the University of Chicago's Stagg Field on December 10, 1942, ushering in the atomic age. Over 900,000 Illinoisans served in the military. war production ended the Depression, creating labor shortages that opened opportunities for women and minorities. But tensions also rose. The 1943 Detroit race riots sparked fears of similar violence in Chicago, though the city avoided major incidents. Post-war boom victory brought unprecedented prosperity. Returning veterans used GI Bill benefits for education and housing. Suburbs exploded around Chicago. Park Forest, Schaumburg, Oak Brook, the interstate highway system, including routes converging on Chicago, reinforced the city's transportation dominance. But prosperity wasn't shared equally. Racial restrictions kept African Americans confined to overcrowded ghettos. White flight to suburbs left cities with declining tax bases. Urban renewal often meant Negro removal, as black neighborhoods were demolished for highways and public housing projects. The Second Great Migration. Between 1940 and 1970, another 3 million African Americans left the South. Chicago's black population grew from 278,000 to over 1 million. This migration transformed Illinois politics and culture. Gospel music flourished with artists like Mahalia Jackson. Chess records, founded by Jewish immigrants, recorded Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Chuck Berry, creating Chicago electric blues and pioneering rock and roll. The Johnson Publishing Company, producing Ebony and Jet magazines, became the nation's largest black-owned business. Part 9. Civil Rights and Social Change. The fight for civil rights, Illinois, played a crucial role in the civil rights movement. In 1940, Chicago's Hansberry v. Lee case challenged racial housing covenants, presaging the Supreme Court's 1948 Shelley v. Kramer decision. The Congress of Racial Equality, founded in Chicago in 1942, pioneered nonviolent, direct action. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1966 Chicago Freedom Movement challenged Northern segregation. King moved into a West Side slum, demanding open housing and better conditions. When marchers entered white neighborhoods, like Marquette Park, they faced violent mobs. King said he'd never seen such hatred, not even in the Deep South. The Fair Housing Act of 1968, passed after King's assassination, was partly a response to Chicago's resistance, but implementation proved difficult. Chicago remained, and remains, one of America's most segregated cities. Political transformations. African American political power grew steadily. William Dawson built a powerful South Side political organization. Ralph Metcalfe broke from the machine to challenge police brutality. In 1983, Harold Washington became Chicago's first black mayor, assembling a rainbow coalition that briefly challenged machine politics. The Latino population also exploded. Mexican Americans, concentrated in Pilsen and Little Village, joined by Puerto Ricans in Humboldt Park, and later Central Americans, became major political forces. By 2000, Latinos comprised 20% of Chicago's population. Cultural Revolution. The 1960s brought cultural upheaval. The 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago became a battlefield between anti-war protesters and police. The televised violence, what investigators called a police riot, shocked America and symbolized national divisions. But Illinois also produced cultural innovations. Second City, founded in 1959, revolutionized comedy through improvisation. Its alumni, including John Belushi, Bill Murray, Tina Fey, and Stephen Colbert, shaped American humor for generations. Chicago's architecture continued evolving. Mies van der Rohe's minimalist steel and glass towers defined the international style. The 1974 Sears Tower, now Willis Tower, became the world's tallest building. Marina City's cylindrical towers and Lake Point Tower's curved facade showed architectural innovation continued. Economic challenges. The 1970s and 1980s brought economic crisis. Manufacturing jobs disappeared as factories moved south or overseas. The steel mills of South Chicago closed. The stockyards shut down in 1971. Middle-class families fled to suburbs, leaving cities with concentrated poverty. Family farms struggled against industrial agriculture. Small towns withered as young people left for cities. The Farm Aid Concert, organized in 1985 in Champaign, highlighted rural America's plight. Part 10. Modern Illinois. Challenges and Triumphs. Political Scandals and Reform. Modern Illinois politics has been marked by corruption scandals. 4 of the last 11 governors went to prison. Rod Blagojevich's attempt to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat became a national embarrassment. But each scandal sparked reform efforts, though success remained mixed. Despite corruption, Illinois produced remarkable leaders. Barack Obama's journey from Chicago community organizer to president inspired millions. His 2008 Grant Park victory speech drew hundreds of thousands, showing Chicago at its best. Carol Moseley Braun became the first African American woman senator in 1992. Tammy Duckworth, a disabled Iraq War veteran, continues breaking barriers. Dick Durbin has served as a powerful progressive voice in the Senate since 1997. Economic transformation. Chicago successfully transitioned to a service economy. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange and Board of Trade, now CME Group, became the world's largest derivatives exchange. The city hosts major corporate headquarters: Boeing, McDonald's, United Airlines, Abbott Laboratories. The tech sector grew with companies like Groupon, Grubhub, and Morningstar. The University of Chicago, Northwestern, and University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign became research powerhouses, spinning off innovations and companies. But inequality widened. Magnificent mile luxury coexists with South and West Side poverty. Illinois has both billionaires and neighborhoods where life expectancy is 30 years less than wealthy areas. The state's financial crisis, driven by underfunded pensions, limits government's ability to address these disparities. Cultural renaissance. Despite challenges, Illinois culture thrives. Chicago's theater scene rivals New York's. Steppenwolf Theater Company launched actors like John Malkovich and Gary Sinise. The city hosts world-class museums: the Art Institute, Field Museum, Museum of Science and Industry. Music remains central. Lollapalooza, Pitchfork, and the Chicago Jazz Festival draw international audiences. Kanye West, Chance the Rapper, and Common continue Chicago's hip-hop legacy. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra and Lyric Opera maintain classical traditions. Chicago's food scene exploded. From deep dish pizza to molecular gastronomy at Alinea, the city became a culinary destination. Its 77 neighborhoods each offer distinct flavors, reflecting ongoing immigration from Mexico, Poland, India, China, and beyond. Looking forward, today's Illinois faces serious challenges. Population loss, particularly downstate, threatens political influence. The state lost a congressional seat after the 2020 census. Young people leave for opportunities elsewhere. Racial segregation persists. Gun violence plagues Chicago streets. But Illinois' strengths endure. Its central location remains invaluable in a global economy. O'Hare is among the world's busiest airports. Chicago is America's railroad hub. The Mississippi River and Great Lakes provide water resources increasingly precious in a warming world. The state's diversity is its greatest asset. Illinois has given America presidents and poets, skyscrapers and blues, nuclear physics and improvisational comedy. From Cahokia's ancient mounds to Chicago's gleaming towers, Illinois has always been where America comes together, contentiously, creatively, and continuously. Conclusion: the Prairie State's enduring legacy. As we conclude our journey through Illinois history, we see recurring themes that define this remarkable state. Illinois has always been a crossroads, where Native American trade routes met, where French voyageurs encountered indigenous peoples, where North met South, East met West, where immigrants from around the world came together. This position created conflicts but also incredible dynamism. The tension between Chicago and downstate, urban and rural, has shaped Illinois politics and culture. Neither can prosper without the other. Though they often forget this interdependence, Illinois embodies American contradictions, soaring idealism and sordid corruption, remarkable innovation and stubborn tradition, inspiring diversity and persistent segregation. The state that gave us Abraham Lincoln also gave us Al Capone. The city that built the world's first skyscrapers also burned in one of history's most famous fires. But perhaps that's Illinois's greatest contribution to America, showing that democracy is messy, progress is difficult, and different peoples can, however imperfectly, build something together. The prairie, that seemed empty to European eyes, had been home to sophisticated civilizations for millennia. The swamp that became Chicago showed that Americans could build anything, anywhere, if they had enough ambition. From the mysterious mound builders of Cahokia to the community organizers of today's Chicago neighborhoods, from French fur traders to high-frequency traders, from the Lincoln-Douglas debates to Obama's Grant Park speech, Illinois has been the stage for the American drama. The land of Lincoln continues to evolve. New immigrants bring fresh energy. Young innovators tackle old problems with new technology. Artists reimagine what the Prairie State can be. The story we've told today is still being written. Illinois' history reminds us that America's heartland is not a place of simplicity, but complexity, not uniformity, but diversity, not stasis, but constant change. Understanding Illinois means understanding America, its failures and triumphs, its broken promises and eternal hopes. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time across the Prairie State. From ancient Cahokia to modern Chicago, from French villages to farming communities, from the land of Lincoln to the city of Big Shoulders, Illinois' story is America's story, complicated, contradictory, and compelling. The history of Illinois proves that the middle of America has always been the most interesting place to be, where the future is invented, where cultures collide and combine, where the American experiment continues, imperfect but enduring, always beginning again on the prairie.